Most men who want power spend their lives chasing it. Marcus Aurelius spent 23 years trying to be worthy of power he never asked for. The difference sounds subtle. It is not subtle at all. The men who chase power, who scheme and flatter and position themselves, who sacrifice friendships and principles and sleep for the possibility of the throne, arrive at the top having spent everything they had getting there. They are hollowed out by the climb. The hunger that drove them doesn't stop when they get what they wanted. It mutates. It finds new things to consume. Marcus arrived at the throne after 23 years of preparation with something almost no Roman emperor before him had possessed: a fully formed interior life that the office could not touch. He had used the waiting well. This is the episode about the waiting. Not the boredom of it, because it was not boring. Not the frustration of it, because Marcus had trained himself, with the specific stoic discipline that Epictetus had described and Apollonius had refined, to find frustration not in circumstances but in his response to them. It is about what a man becomes when he is given 23 years to prepare for the hardest job in the world and he takes every day of it seriously. What he became was the closest thing to the philosopher king that Plato had imagined 4 centuries earlier. And the first thing he did when he finally had the power was give half of it away. He had 23 years between being chosen and being emperor. Most people waste that kind of time. Marcus Aurelius used every day of it, studying philosophy, learning governance, watching Antoninus Pius run the empire from the inside, writing letters that survived 2,000 years. This is the episode where the philosopher becomes the ruler. Subscribe, like the video, and let's get into it. The man Marcus spent 23 years learning from deserves more attention than history usually gives him. Antoninus Pius ruled Rome from 138 to 161, 23 years, the entirety of Marcus's preparation period, a reign so stable and prosperous and administratively competent that it generated almost no dramatic events for historians to write about. No major wars, no purges, no famines, no catastrophic floods. The empire ran. Justice was administered. The frontiers held. People lived and died, and the machinery of the largest political entity in the Western world continued to function with the quiet efficiency of a well-maintained system. This is, in the history of the Roman Empire, extraordinarily rare. Antoninus achieved it through a combination of personal qualities that Marcus catalogued in the opening pages of the Meditations with the precision of a man who had been studying a master at close range for 2 decades. He was patient. He was methodical. He never made decisions in anger. He listened to advisors without being controlled by them. He was genuinely unimpressed by luxury and ceremony. He worked. He also critically trusted Marcus. Not immediately. Trust between emperors and heirs was complicated by the structural reality that an heir was also, always, a potential replacement. But Antoninus managed this with the same methodical intelligence he brought to everything else. He included Marcus in decisions. He explained his reasoning. He allowed Marcus to disagree, to ask questions, to push back. And when Marcus pushed back, he either changed his position or explained clearly why he hadn't. It was the best political education in the history of the world. And Marcus paid attention to every day of it. In 145, Marcus married Faustina the Younger. She was the daughter of Antoninus Pius, which made the marriage simultaneously a political arrangement and a genuine family connection, the kind of overlap between duty and affection that characterized the Antonine dynasty at its best. The sources on Faustina are complicated. Later Roman historians, writing after Marcus's death, after Faustina's death, with the specific agenda of contrasting the philosopher-emperor's virtue with the alleged vices of those around him, were not kind to her. They accused her of infidelities. They suggested that several of her children were not Marcus's. They constructed, in the way that Roman historians specialized in constructing, a narrative in which the good man was surrounded by people who did not deserve him. Marcus himself tells a different story. In the Meditations, he thanks the gods for giving him a wife who was obedient, affectionate, and simple. He mentions her with warmth that does not read like performance. The journal was private, written for himself, with no audience to perform goodness for. He grieved her death in 175 with a public display of mourning that the sources record as genuine rather than ceremonial. They had 14 children together. 8 of them died before Marcus did. He buried 8 of his children. He wrote about loss and impermanence and the necessity of accepting what cannot be changed, and he buried 8 of his children, and he kept writing, and he kept governing, and he kept doing the work. The correspondence between Marcus and Fronto survived. Not all of it, enough of it. Letters written across 2 decades, covering everything from the progress of Marcus's rhetorical education to the health of Fronto's grandchildren to the specific pleasures of reading in the afternoon to the philosophical disagreements that ran as a friendly undercurrent through their entire relationship. They are remarkable documents for a simple reason. They reveal Marcus as a human being. The meditations reveal a mind. They reveal the interior architecture of an extraordinary philosophical intelligence, the private conversation a man had with himself about how to live. But they do not reveal warmth or humor or the specific texture of daily life the way the letters do. In the letters, Marcus is funny. He teases Fronto about his rhetorical pretensions with an affection that makes the teasing land as love rather than contempt. He describes his daily life with the specificity of a man who finds everything interesting. The books he is reading, the cases he is hearing as a magistrate, the agricultural work he did on his family estate, the physical training he maintained throughout his life. He describes in one letter, a day spent harvesting grapes on the estate. The work, the physical pleasure of it, the specific quality of tired that honest physical labor produces. He was the heir to the Roman Empire, and he spent a day harvesting grapes and wrote to his teacher about how good it felt. Fronto wrote back and told him he should spend more time on his rhetoric. Marcus, one suspects, smiled and went back to his grapes. Antoninus included Marcus in governance from early in his reign. This was not ceremonial. Marcus was not brought into the room to sit at the emperor's side and look important. He was given work. Real work, cases to hear, documents to review, decisions to make within the limits of his authority, problems to solve with the resources available to him. He took it seriously in the way he took everything seriously. The sources record that Marcus spent more time than any previous imperial heir in the law courts, hearing cases, applying the law with the methodical attention to individual circumstance that Stoic ethics demanded. The Stoics believed that every human being had equal worth, that the slave and the senator were equally rational creatures deserving of equal moral consideration. This was abstract philosophy in a philosophical text. In a Roman law court in the 2nd century, it was radical. Marcus applied it anyway. He also learned the military side of governance, though the Antonine period provided little opportunity for actual military command. He trained. He studied military history and doctrine. He learned the logistical systems that kept the legions supplied and the frontiers defended. He was preparing, with characteristic thoroughness, for a military role he hoped he would never need. He would need it for most of his reign. The tension at the center of Marcus's life during these 23 years was between philosophy and power. Not in the obvious way, not the tension between thinking and doing, between the contemplative life and the active one. Marcus had resolved that tension early, through the Stoic framework that made duty the highest expression of philosophy rather than its opposite. The work was the practice. Governing well was the philosophical act. The tension was subtler than that. It was the tension between what philosophy told him was true and what power required him to do. Philosophy told him that every human being had equal worth. Power required him to operate within a system built entirely on the inequality of human beings, on slavery, on the hierarchy of Roman citizenship, on the structural violence that kept the empire functioning. He could ameliorate. He could apply the law more humanely than his predecessors. He could free individual slaves, hear individual cases with individual care. He could not dismantle the system. He knew this. He wrote about it, in the oblique way the meditations addressed everything uncomfortable. Not by naming the specific problem but by returning, again and again, to the question of what a person could actually change and what they had to accept. To the instruction, always directed at himself, to do the good that was available to be done and not to be destroyed by the good that wasn't. He was 20 years into his preparation for the throne, and he was already thinking about its limits. March 7, 161. Antoninus Pius was 74 years old and had been emperor for 23 years. He died the way he had lived, without drama, without crisis, with the methodical completion of his responsibilities. The sources record that on his last day he ate alpine cheese for dinner, went to sleep, and died in the night of a fever. He gave the password for the night watch to the tribune on duty. The password was equanimity. It was, for a man who had governed the largest empire in the Western world for 23 years without a single catastrophic failure, an appropriate last word. Marcus was 40 years old. He had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it, dreading it, accepting its inevitability with the stoic discipline that had been the project of his entire adult life, for 23 years. And now it was here. The purple robe. The throne. The weight of 1,000,000 daily decisions, 1,000,000 people whose lives depended on the quality of his attention. He put on the robe. And then he did something that no Roman emperor before him had done. He called for Lucius Verus. Lucius Verus was the other boy that Hadrian had required Antoninus to adopt. Marcus's co-heir, his adopted brother, a man who had grown up in the same imperial household through the same 23 years of preparation and had spent most of that time enjoying himself rather than studying philosophy. He was not Marcus Aurelius. He liked parties. He liked chariot racing. He liked the specific pleasures of wealth and power that Marcus had been training himself to be indifferent to since he was 11 years old. He was not a bad man. The sources are clear on this, and Marcus himself is clear on this in the Meditations. He was simply a different kind of man. Marcus made him co-emperor anyway. Equal rank. Equal authority. The same purple robe, the same title, the same legal powers. Two emperors ruling Rome simultaneously, something the empire had never seen before, something the constitutional structure of the Principate had not been designed for, something that every political advisor in Rome would have told Marcus was unnecessary and potentially dangerous. Marcus did it anyway, because Lucius was his brother. Because the arrangement Hadrian had created had always implied it. Because a philosopher who believed in the equal worth of human beings could not take the throne and immediately deny it to the person who had been promised it alongside him. Because it was right. He had spent 23 years preparing to do what was right rather than what was expedient. He was 40 years old and he was starting immediately. The question was what came next. What came next was a war in the East, a plague that killed 5 million people, and the slow discovery that doing what was right at the scale of an empire was considerably more complicated than any philosopher had imagined.